Okay. Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you to August's SB 1383 Chat with CalRecycle. Appreciate everyone being here. This month, we are focusing on residential program implementation, and we have a great group of panelists here to go ahead and contribute and begin those conversations with all of you stakeholders. We do have some people still coming in from the waiting room, but I think we're okay to go ahead and get started. Quickly, we'll go through some of the webinar logistics. Darren, could you go to the next slide, please? Perfect. Thank you. So while we have some people still trickling in, a quick reminder of how the question and answer sessions will go. Please type your question or a summary of your question into the Q&A pane. Make sure you have the most up-to-date version of Zoom if you do not see this option. Once called upon, please unmute yourself and state your name and affiliation when asked by CalRecycle staff. You may also submit peer share requests, feedback, and panelist questions to slcp.organics@calrecycle.ca.gov using the subject line SB 1383 Chat with CalRecycle. If you cannot unmute yourself or we're unable to get your question, please also submit those questions to the SLCP inbox, and we will have our LAMD representatives get back to you in a timely fashion. And for our first panelist, I'll go ahead and pass it off to CalRecycle staff. Emily.
Thanks, Ray. So I'm Emily Schuetz with CalRecycle, and I'd like to introduce Jeannie Patton, who is the Supervising Recycling Specialist with the City of San Diego's Environmental Services Department. Jeannie has been with the city for 6 years now and has worked extensively on the education outreach for SB 1383. So without further ado, take it away, Jeannie.
All right, thank you, Emily. And yes, good afternoon to everybody. My name is Jeannie Patton, and I am the Supervising Recycling Specialist for the City of San Diego's Environmental Services Department. I'd really like to thank CalRecycle for inviting me to speak today. I'd like to thank Ray for organizing this chat, and I'd like to thank everybody who's in attendance. So hopefully I can provide you with some good information. I'll be providing information about strategies that have contributed to the successful implementation of SB 1383. Next slide, please. All right, well, I really have to say that preparation has been key for our implementation of SB 1383. As you'll see on the screen, various procedures and funding needed to be determined in order to move forward with this project. Collection trucks needed to be purchased. Plans for increased organic material processing needed to be established. Staff needed to be hired. Both the municipal code and the franchise agreement needed to be amended, and a comprehensive education and outreach plan needed to be developed. And because positive behavior change with both residents and businesses is such a key element for the success of SB 1383 and organic waste recycling. Throughout this presentation, I will be focusing on education and outreach strategies that we used for this implementation. So next slide. Thank you. So beginning in 2022, our education and outreach team started to reach out to town councils and community planning groups to schedule SB 1383 presentations throughout the city of San Diego. And this was all in addition to libraries and rec centers and schools, businesses, multifamily residents, and HOAs that we would normally provide presentations to. And so between our staff and our education contractors, and our education contractors are both Solana Center for Environmental Innovation and I Love a Clean San Diego. So between our staff and these contractors, we provided over 100 SB 1383 presentations in 2022 and over 100 so far up until now in 2023 with more to go. But it didn't start at this point. As I said, preparation has been key. So even prior to the implementation of 1383 on January 1 of 2022, our education about organic waste recycling was well underway. In 2021, we provided webinars to a variety of business sectors focused on AB 1826, but this gave us the opportunity to introduce the upcoming requirements for SB 1383. And even prior to that, for over a decade, we've been providing food scrap recycling, technical assistance, and education to businesses participating in the City of San Diego's commercial food scraps composting program. So this was all great because it laid the groundwork. It meant that the idea of organic waste recycling was not a brand new concept for many businesses and residents in San Diego because of this prior education. And next slide. All right, so I'm going to talk about our city serviced residential customers. So the city of San Diego is somewhat unique. I feel that many jurisdictions have private haulers that provide trash and recycling services to their businesses and residents. So in the city of San Diego, we actually have city staff driving city trucks that provide trash and recycling service to approximately 285,000 households. And these are primarily single family homes and some smaller multifamilies. So when it came to yard waste collection, though, we had several categories before 1383 came into place. So we have, or had, I should say, customers who had biweekly automated service. So this meant that they already had a green bin and that it was being picked up by a truck that had the automated arm that would pick it up and collect it. It was strictly yard waste and it was only happening every other week. So that was one category. And then we also had customers who were manual collections. So that means there was a truck that came by with a person on the back that would get out and they would pick up a store-bought container that was provided by the customer. And they would empty that into the green bin. And once again, that was only bi-weekly and it was only yard waste collection. And we had those who had not received any type of yard waste collection at all yet. So when we moved into rolling out the green bins and the kitchen pails, we had three categories that we had to address differently. So those who already had the green bin and the automated trucks servicing them, there were approximately 47,000 of these residents. They received kitchen pails only because they already had a green bin. And so the kitchen pails are meant to be used inside in the kitchen to collect the food scraps and then emptied into the green bin. But once they received that kitchen pail, they then knew that that meant they had weekly service and that service would include food scraps in addition to yard trimmings. And then for the remaining manual customers and those who had no pre-existing yard waste collection, all of these customers received both a green bin and a kitchen pail, and that would trigger the fact that they were having weekly both food scrap and yard waste collection. So I'm going to get into talking about the logistics of rolling out the green bin and how that played into our education strategy. But prior to that, I do want to talk about the lead up and the preparation of our education material for this rollout of the green bin. So we're going to go to the next slide. Excellent. So yes, prior to the rollout of the green bins, each city service resident received 2 mailers. They received an announcement letter that was sent 2 months prior to the delivery of the green bins in their area, or kitchen bales, if that's the category they fit into. They received a guide that was then sent 1 month prior. And both of these outreach materials were made in English, Spanish, Tagalog, and Vietnamese. Census tract data had shown that these are the 4 most commonly spoken languages throughout the city of San Diego. Additionally, when the bins are delivered, educational flyers are inserted both in the kitchen pail and an informational tag is attached to the green bin itself. And then even in addition to that, there are educational graphics displayed on the lid of the green bin and on the body of the kitchen pail. So I'll be showing all of these images in a few slides down the road here. But right now, what I'd like you to focus on your screen is the letter. So it's a 1-page letter. But as you see, it's a half page on the top in English and a half page on the bottom in Spanish, with 4 images in the middle that show the different steps of collecting the food scraps, collecting the yard trimmings, getting it all into your green bin for that weekly collection. And on the flip side of the letter, we had the Tagalog, and Vietnamese letters with the same 4 images. We wanted to make sure everything was very equitable and that the same images were on both sides, so that whichever side you looked at, you saw the 4 processes, steps in place. And I do want to mention that these were a tri-folded letter that went into an envelope that had the city's logo and return address. And I bring that up because we chose that option. As many of you know who do education outreach, you could do a tri-fold mailer where you could put the address right on the mailer itself. But we've done that on other campaigns, and we found that recipients sometimes toss that away thinking it's junk mail. And we felt that having that more official looking letter with the city's logo on it would give us a higher instance of people actually opening up the envelope, reading the letter. So that's what we went with. And we're going to go on to the next slide. All right, so on this slide, you're seeing an example of our curbside organic waste recycling guide. So this is a magazine style mailer. It's actually 20 pages. So on the screen on the left, you're seeing the cover, and it has the title, Curbside Organic Waste Recycling Guide, in 4 different languages, the English, Spanish, Tagalog, and Vietnamese. The guide includes a table of contents, and it has 4 pages in each language. So the example that you're seeing on here are the 4 pages in English, but we had the exact same information in the 4 different languages, all part of that same magazine style mailer. So on the first page, there's a short note, a letter that's very similar to the original letter that the customers received, but it's updating them with more information about when the green bins are coming. It's providing them with resources and websites where they can learn about clean bin tips. And on the bottom of that first page, you're seeing the organic waste cycle. So it takes them through, everything from collecting the food scraps, getting the food scraps and the yard trimmings in the bin, the truck coming by once a week and picking up that bin, getting it to the Miramar Greenery where it goes through a 60-day process, where with the aid of air and water and microorganisms, the scraps are transformed into compost. And then the final step shows somebody using that compost in their garden, because in the city of San Diego, city residents can get up to 2 cubic yards of that material for free. So it shows this really nice local closed loop system of how we're using that material. And then on page 2, we are showing them tips on how to successfully collect both their food scraps and their yard trimmings, and an image of both the kitchen pail and the green bin. And on the 3rd page, we show the acceptable material in the green bin. So we're showing the food scraps, food soiled paper, and yard trimmings that can go in there. And on the bottom of that page, we're giving tips for keeping your green bin clean. We knew that the ick factor was going to be an issue, that people are going to be concerned about residues and odors. So we really wanted to get out in front of that and be proactive and address these concerns right out front before they even receive the bin. So it shows them layering of the bin. You see the cutout of the green bin, and it shows yard trimmings and food soiled paper on the bottom. And then the food scraps themselves kind of cradled in between that material with more yard trimmings on top, to help reduce odors, help avoid the residues. And on the right, we give tips about keeping your bin in a shaded area to avoid it heating up. If you do have odors, sprinkling baking soda on the material, and even tips on cleaning your bin over a landscaped area. And we wanted it over a landscaped area because we wanted to avoid storm drain contamination. So that was all page 3. So quite a bit of information packed into this guide. And then on the final page, we went over some collection day reminders of what time to put the bin out, that your bin should be 3 feet away from other items such as another bin or a vehicle. We talked about not bagging your recyclables and making sure that you're not overfilling that bin so it's overflowing with material. And then, the final things were some frequently asked questions. So we addressed things about what size of a bin I'm going to get, and I'll talk a little bit more about the size options in a later slide. But we also talked about compostable bags, and that was a big issue because we can't accept compostable bags, which I feel probably many jurisdictions are in that same boat, at least in Southern California, because of our dry environment, that compostable bags just don't break down. So we wanted to explain that to the residents. And finally, on the bottom of the page, you see that we promoted our webinars and workshops that were happening while the green bins were getting rolled out. So I'll talk about that in just a little bit too. But this was the guide that went out to every single city serviced resident. And we'll go to the next slide. Thank you. So on the screen right now, you're seeing the green bin tag, the kitchen pail insert, and the graphics that were displayed on the green bin lid, and on the body of the kitchen pail. So the big idea with these delivered materials was to reinforce the information that was in the mailers. But also to give another chance to get this information out. So if we sent the mailers out and somebody just tossed it away, hopefully into their recycling bin, not even looking at it, we wanted another chance for them to get this information. So our goal with all of these pieces was to be very purposefully that they all gave very consistent information that aligned with each other document, but also that they could be standalone. So if it was the only education piece that this resident looked at, that it would really provide them with a good picture of, of what they needed to do to start taking part in this new program. So on the left is the green bin tag. And I wanted to let everyone know we actually updated this as we went through the green bin rollout. About a month into it, we started realizing that a lot of people who had their own manual bins, their own store-bought containers, they were still putting out those store-bought containers, and we can't pick them up any longer. Our new trucks are automated. They're geared towards picking up the new green bin. So we updated the green bin tag midway through, not even midway, a month into it, to let residents know, please put all of your material in your brand new green bin, showing them that layering that, that they could do to avoid ick. And please do not place your manual bins out any longer, your store-bought containers. And once again, we reminded them that it was a weekly service. It shows the acceptable material. So staying consistent. With the tags, we had one side in English and one side in Spanish. We didn't want to do a whole 2 tags because it is a smaller population that would need Vietnamese and Tagalog. But we did do a QR code, and we put a statement in Vietnamese and a statement in Tagalog, letting them know if they would like to read this information in those languages, that they could go to our website and be able to access that information. And then in the center, you're seeing the kitchen pail insert. And it's a 1-pager in that particular language, but it was actually 4 pages, English, Spanish, Tagalog, and Vietnamese. So it was an 11 by 17 that's folded in half and then folded in half again. So it would fit in the kitchen pail. Once again, giving that very brief letter at the very top saying, hi neighbor, welcome to your new green bin, and letting them know that it's going to be weekly service, and letting them know it's starting now that you have your bin in your kitchen pail. This is starting right away. And then the steps to do it correctly, the acceptable material, the unacceptable material, the clean bin tips. And then at the very bottom, you're seeing the size option. So we have 35, 65, and 95 gallon bins. We had to predetermine the bins that would go out. So it was determined that a single family home would get a 95 gallon bin, or if they were receiving trash and recycling service in 65 gallon bins, they'd get a 65. And if it was a multifamily unit, 2 houses on one lot, or a 4-unit complex, they would be receiving a 35 gallon per unit. That did adjust a little bit during the course of rollout. We determined that a lot of 4 units would receive a 95 to share. But they always had the option of making a switch. So the kitchen pail insert explains to them that if it's not the size that they wanted, they could right size their bin. They had to keep it brand new and unused. They had to remove the kitchen pail from it, and they could actually call or go to our Get It Done app or website, and they could schedule a Saturday swap out so that they could have the size that would work best for them. So that was on the insert. And then on the right, you're seeing the graphic on the green bin lid and the graphic on the body of the kitchen pail. And these are long-term reminders of the acceptable material, because these residents are going to have their green bin for many years, and their kitchen pail, hopefully they'll have it for a very, very long time. We could only do those in English and Spanish due to size constraints, but these are very image oriented graphics, so we felt like the images really stand for themselves, or they're understandable in any language. So we did feel it was acceptable to go with that option, so they can easily look at it and see that this is the material you can put in this particular container. All right, so we're going to move on to the next slide. All right, so green bin rollout in and of itself. was a huge undertaking, and I should say still is a huge undertaking because we're not quite done yet. The project has spanned, as you'll see from the table on the slide, from January through August of 2023. As of August 8th of this year, a few weeks ago, we finished delivering green bins and kitchen pails to every neighborhood throughout the city, with the exception of Mission Beach. We pushed that off until the end of September, so we can deliver bins and pails to this area once tourist season is over. So Mission Beach is a very high tourist area, and we didn't want to have to be competing with all of the traffic in a tight area. So we will be continuing, but we're primarily done with all of the rollout of the green bins. There were 5 phases, and they were based on the day of the week that trash collection occurs for that area. And that made it very nice and neat for us to be able to do outreach. If someone called our call center and they asked, when am I getting my green bin and kitchen pail? We could very easily say, well, what day of the week are you serviced on for your trash? And then we could give them the month that was going to start in their area. So it did make for a nice, neat way to provide information to the public. And we particularly decided to start with Wednesday customers. Most of our work is guided by the city's climate equity index, and Wednesday customers had a variety of communities that really have less access to education and resources. So we wanted to start in an area that we wanted to be sure to be able to provide that information to right away. We contracted crews from, I'm gonna have to take a drink of water here. I'm sorry. We contracted with a company named Rarick, and they had crews that did assembling and distributing of bins 5 days a week throughout the whole 8 months. We did do a few breaks where we took a week off in between each phase, but for the most part, we had between 3 to 9 crews out 5 days a week based on delivery needs. And when I say assembling the bins, you see a picture at the bottom, there's a huge truck that shows up and it's got all the bins, and they actually have to knock down the stack of the bins, pull one bin at a time, add in the wheels on the bin and a crossbar, and get them ready to go. And on the far right, as someone said, would I like a cough drop? I think I'm doing fine. I had a brief moment there. Thank you very much. On the far right, you see the final product of the green bin with a kitchen pail that is zip tied to it. And you can see the cart tag that's attached to the green bin, and you can't see the kitchen pail insert, but it is in the kitchen pail. So that's what each resident received who did not already have a green bin. Okay, and in addition to that, we did create a fact sheet. So we have a monthly fact sheet that runs through numbers. It runs through the numbers of bins that were delivered during that month, the tonnage amounts that we've been collecting in organic waste. I believe for now, for the year, we're up over 25,000 tons that have been collected from the start of the green bin rollout program. And we even track like how many people have decided to do swap outs of their containers, just to give us an idea of how effective it's been. And this has been information we've been able to provide to CalRecycle for updates on the success of the program. All right, and I'm going to go on to slide 9, and I think I've gotten my voice back, so that's good. Sorry about that little departure there. Yeah, so we're part of the waste reduction division, and our team is very geared towards education and outreach. And so we really saw the green bin rollout as an incredible opportunity to reach out to residents. And we have staff that were around 20 years ago when we rolled out blue bins, and they had outreach teams out in the neighborhoods when the blue bins were being delivered. So we've done the exact same strategy, that every crew that was out had an outreach staff, at least one person or maybe a team of 2 that were walking in the neighborhoods as the bins and pails were being delivered. So these crews included recycling specialists, code compliance officers, interns, and even California Climate Action Corps fellows that have worked with us. And while we're out in the neighborhoods, we engage with residents to answer questions about collection day for the green bin, the location and frequency of when we'll be picking up the green bin. And even for everybody who's read all of our literature, they're always still like every week, you're going to come every week to pick this up. And they're always very excited that we're going to do weekly collection because they've been so used to the bi-weekly blue bin collection. So it's been pretty exciting to break that news to them. We go over the acceptable material in the bin. We go over the Saturday swap outs that they can do if they want to right size the bin, tips on keeping the bins clean, avoiding the ick factor, the importance of organic waste recycling. So that gives us the opportunity to talk about climate change and landfill space and discuss some of those topics. And we can talk about how the material is going to be recycled locally at the Miramar Greenery and turned into compost. And that they, as city residents, can go out and get those 2 cubic yards of material for free. So in addition to providing information, we also have the opportunity of getting their feedback and their concerns. And it helps us to, then further develop the outreach that we need to do. So it's been really great to get out there and talk to the public. We've engaged with over 20,000 residents during these neighborhoods walks. It's an estimate, but based on the number that I know, we can reach during each day, over 20,000 residents have been engaged with. It's required long days, a lot of walking and a variety of weather conditions. We've had hailstorms and rainstorms and heat waves. We've interacted with a variety of different types of residents. Not every one of them is incredibly happy about the new change. We sometimes called it caring loudly. But what we've realized is overwhelmingly the number of residents are really glad to receive their new green bin and this new weekly service. And our staff have found this to be a very rewarding experience. It's very historical. It's a very paradigm changing event. So it's been really great. And we're really looking forward to the final phase in September and being able to engage with Mission Beach residents. All right, so next slide. Okay, so I did tell you I was going to talk about webinars and workshops. And yes, during the entire 5 phases of the green bin rollout, we have provided 2 webinars and 2 workshops for each phase of the rollout. So in total, 10 webinars and 10 workshops. And we do have one more planned in October to focus on Mission Beach residents that will receive the green bin in late September. The workshops were held at libraries or rec centers, and they were in communities where the bins were being delivered during that phase. The webinars, although, there's no location for those, we promoted those to communities using Nextdoor to focus on people that were getting the green bins at that time. Yet anyone could register and attend any workshop or any webinar at any point during this. Although we did focus on the rollout phase at that time. So during the presentation, we specifically focused on city service customers and green bin service. So we reinforced all the information in the mailers and the handouts that were delivered during rollout. So acceptable material in the green bin, collection information, clean bin tips, right sizing your green bin, how material was going to be recycled into compost, and it was available for city residents for free. At each workshop that we did in person, we always had an information booth that you see in the bottom left photo here. It was outside of the webinar or the workshop, sorry. So what that meant is we were able to, in addition to reaching attendees of the workshop, we were able to engage with passersby. So it really helped us increase the number of residents that we engaged with. And we were able to give out free compost samples in little brown bags to either attendees or passersby. And we had a fun sort activity. So kids would come up and they could try their hand at seeing how well they could sort a sample of material into either the green, black, or blue bin. And sometimes the adults wanted to do that too. So they were really fun events. And in all, with webinars and workshops, we engaged with over 500 residents. And next slide. Okay, so everything I've talked about thus far has been with city serviced residents. And I said that the city itself does service trash recycling and now organic waste recycling with those residents. But multifamily residents and businesses are serviced by private haulers. However, our education and outreach team and our code officers conduct site visits and provide technical assistance whenever needed. So we provide education about acceptable material in the organic waste bins, tips on right sizing your bins and service levels. We can't determine that. That's between the customer and the private hauler, but we can provide tips on getting the correct levels that are going to work best for either your residents or your staff at your business. Tips on successful setup of programs to strategically place bins where they're going to be easily accessible by either your tenants or your staff. So if it's a business that's a food generating business, making sure back of house kitchens have those bins in good places where the workers can easily get that material into the bins, or in break rooms for any type of business where there's food being generated. We provide signage templates, and as you see on the screen, between 2022 and 2023 we provided over 150 visits to multifamilies or HOAs and over 150 visits to businesses. So we're trying to get out to as many as we can to really get the word out and really help sites do things correctly and have a successful program. Almost 100 of the businesses that we visited were tier 1 food generators. So as many of you know, in addition to providing information about organic waste recycling and recycling requirements, we also provide information about food donation requirements for these businesses and how they can work with food recovery organizations. And we're going to go on to the next slide. Thank you. So in addition to all of the boots on the ground education I've been discussing, the Environmental Services Department worked in conjunction with marketing consultants and launched a citywide marketing campaign. So as you see on the screen, a wide variety of marketing tools have been implemented, everything from billboards and transit signs to grocery cart signs, trash truck signs. We've had streaming audio, social media, email blasts, online banner ads. And in addition to all that, we've had radio, TV, and newspaper, both paid and earned media. And so the strategy has been to have messaging everywhere, to have organic waste recycling become a common household idea. And we'll go to the next slide. And more about the organic waste recycling marketing campaign is it's also included the creation of a website, a toolkit that goes out to a list of stakeholders that the marketing consultants helped us to develop. And the toolkit has all of our different educational pieces in it that they can reference and share with others. And 6 videos have already been created, and we have 2 more in production at this moment that will focus on businesses and organic waste recycling at those businesses, and a residential what goes where that includes both recycling and organic waste recycling and trash. And so the overall goals of the marketing campaign are to provide consistent and clear messaging to help empower San Diego residents and businesses to succeed at organic waste recycling, to reinforce the benefits for both San Diego's local environment and for climate change overall, and to be responsive to community concerns and deliver solutions through our educational messaging. And the guiding principle for all of this education and outreach has been equity. So within the city of San Diego, we have an emphasis on prioritizing education to communities that have less access to education and resources. All right, and I'm going to go on to the next slide. And I want to say thank you to everybody. I see there are some questions coming in the chat, so I want to thank you for being here and welcome any questions that you have.
Thank you. Before we go into the questions, Darren, can you check if the next slide is the Q&A instructions? If not, just go back to the second slide, please. Thank you so much. Perfect. So again, we'll go ahead and use the Q&A pane to ask questions. At which point, once we get to your question, CalRecycle staff will go ahead and unmute you. Please state your name, affiliation, ask your question. If it is geared to a specific panelist, please note that, and we will go ahead and make sure it gets to them. If you cannot unmute yourself or we don't get to your question at the end of the session, please go ahead and forward it to slcp.organics@calrecycle.ca.gov with the subject line SB 1383, chat with CalRecycle. And with that, I will go ahead and pass it to Katie.
Hi, so it looks like we do have some questions rolling in. Have a couple from Sam Dickinson. The first one I would like to save for the end of this chat because I think it's probably best addressed by CalRecycle staff. But the second one seems like probably a good question for Jeannie to answer. So Sam, you should be able to unmute yourself now. And please go ahead and ask your question about the compostable bags, if you're able to.
Hey there. Yeah, thanks for taking my question. So it is, does anyone have advice or experience starting post-consumer collection in an organics waste shed that does not allow plastic bags or compostable bags? Are businesses expected to collect source separated post-consumer organic waste without the use of bags?
Well, what I can address, prior to 1383, one of my major projects was our commercial food scraps composting program that never allowed compostable bags. And so we were successful. We were able to provide instructions on keeping your bins clean. And doing it in a way that did not, cause stormwater contamination. So we've had businesses collecting food scraps in the back of house in their kitchens for over a decade, and not using any type of bag at all. And it worked well. With our residential, we do say that they can put it now in a paper bag or wrap it in newspaper if they would like. And I do know they do have those tall paper bags. So that could be something that could be used in a commercial setting. I believe they were originally made for yard trimmings, but they would fit potentially in a green bin. So that could help with the ick factor.
Thank you for that. Our next question comes from Paul Freund. Paul, you're unmuted on our end. Please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so 2 questions for Jean. Do you have any data showing that there's more residents opening the mailers if they're in the official looking envelope as opposed to the mailers that you mentioned looked more like junk mail? So it sounds like you worked with a consultant. Were they able to gather any data on that? And then the second question is, this came up recently at a meeting last week where a jurisdiction mentioned that they thought that providing compost free of charge to the public could be construed as a gift of public funds. I know for us as a solid waste agency, we'll have people call us about illegal dumping. If it's on the public rights of way, it can be cleaned up by Public Works. But if it's on private land, that would be gifting public funds, and we can't do that. So I'm curious, about that as well. And then I had a question for CalRecycle for later.
Okay, and let's see, the first part was about the mailers. I don't have any hard data about that. I mean, what led us to that decision, we had sent tier 1 mailers out, and then we were doing the site visits, and we were being told like, oh, we never saw this mailer. They were tri-folded, they weren't put in an envelope, and they had the address put on one of the, one of the folds. And so that's kind of what led us to that decision. And we should have it in an envelope and have it look official, that we'd have more of a likelihood. So I don't have any hard data on it, just that through our tier 1 site visits, we were being told that not many people had actually even seen the mailer. And that could also be due to it being a business where maybe the person that collects the mail, so maybe that would be different with a residence. Maybe they would look at the trifold, but we didn't have a really strong viewership of those tri-folded ones. And we didn't work with a marketing consultant on the mailers. We did that all in-house. And then the second question, Oh, if you want to email me that question, I could try to find out from leadership if we've ever run into any issues with it being looked at as gifting. But we've had our free compost system in place for a very long time. I've been with the city for almost 6 years, and it was in place well before I started with the city. So we've never run into that problem that I know of. But my email is jmpatton, PATTON @sandiego.gov. If you want to send me that, I can try to look further into it.
All right, next up, it looks like we have a couple of questions from Ruben Hernandez. Ruben, you should be able to unmute and please ask your first question.
Yeah, hi, thank you for taking my question, and thank you for the presentation, Jean, and the great work you're doing down there in San Diego.
Thank you.
I wanted to first know if are you familiar with how the rollout at MFDs is going, and how are they mitigating contamination issues?
Mhm. We have been tracking contamination. I mean, we don't track it every single day, but we have some crews out tracking it. And we're mapping, so we can actually attach, we can see the truck number that comes in, and we can attach that to a route. So we can see which route, which types of contamination have come from. And we've done that primarily for our education and outreach teams to be able to use that data to be able then to do very specified education. So if they're getting ready to do a presentation in a certain community, they could actually get onto the mapped GIS layer and see what types of contamination are coming from the routes in that area and target it. So, I mean, that's our biggest mitigation, is to try to do more education and to try to focus that education on the types of contamination that we're seeing. If that answers your question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then my second question was regarding the marketing campaign that I think was fantastic. And what was your budget for that?
Ooh, I don't know. I have worked more on the first part. I talked about the boots on the ground. I can give you my email address. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. I'm looking at my phone to see if my program manager might send me that number, because I know she's on this call. But I don't have that number. If she sends it over to me, I will provide it to you in the chat.
It looks like Julie did
Oh, okay.
1.6 million.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't have that number off of the top of my head. Thanks, Julie. Yes, and she just texted me 1.6 million.
Team effort all around.
Yes.
Our next question is from Noreen Swiatek. Noreen, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Please go ahead and state your name and remind everybody of your affiliation. Go ahead and ask your question. Thanks.
Hi, this is Noreen. I'm with the City of San Juan Capistrano. Great job, San Diego. You're doing so good on everything. I was wondering, is all this marketing and all this promotional and social media, is this done in-house, or are you working with a specific firm consultant?
It's a combination. So all of the mailers that I talked about, and the kitchen pail insert and the cart tag and the graphics, we did that all in-house. And then all of the pieces that you saw at the end, the billboards, the transit signs, the grocery cart signs, even the development of a new website, that was all done by marketing consultants. We work with Tetra Tech as the marketing consultant. They have sub consultants that work with them. So that was the 1.6 million that the number was for, was everything to do with the marketing campaign. And I'd even say the media is a combination, because we have ComD, we call them, as our communications department. So we do work with the local media, we're on the news and stuff, and that's sometimes through our communications department, and some of it's been through our marketing campaign.
All right, thanks. I think up next we have Jasmine Haddon.
Oh, and before Jasmine goes, I also wanted to say all of the webinar and workshops were coordinated in-house as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Jeannie. All right, Jasmine, if you're ready, you should be able to unmute now.
Hi, I was actually going to ask a question about the workshops, specifically if you had data on what the attendance was like and what outreach you found was most helpful in getting an increase of attendance.
Yeah, so we had over 500 for the total. We did find the webinars had a much better attendance than the workshops. It was much harder to get people to come out. Maybe that's a byproduct of COVID and everyone getting so used to doing things like as we are right now, in a virtual setting. So I'd say the webinars, I know we had ones with like 30 or 40 people at them. And the workshops were smaller. We did have a workshop with 30 people at it. We had one with like 18 and I think another with about 14, but there were a few that had very low attendance, except that we had that booth outside and we were able to engage with many passersby, even if they didn't take the time to attend the hour-long event. And as far as marketing it, so we had stakeholder lists that the toolkit went out to. So the toolkit would always have an advertisement of the webinars and workshops. We advertised on Nextdoor. Our website had advertisements. I'll be curious to see our newest one coming up at the end of October. We did one more additional letter that's getting mailed out this week to Mission Beach customers, because we did a switch up at the end, like we changed the dates on them because of tourist season. And we actually did put in that letter the date and time and location of the workshop. So I'll be curious to see if that brings out a higher number of people with them each receiving it in the letter. But
And did you post those on the website or?
Yes, our website has the dates, times, the registration information. In fact, that's where you register for a webinar or workshop. Of course, anybody showing up at a workshop they can show up and not have registered and attend, but for the webinars, they had to register ahead of time. And we promoted that people register ahead of time for the workshops as well. And that was on our website.
Sorry, I meant, did you post the recordings of the webinars after the
Oh,
fact?
I'm sorry. We actually waited to the end on that. We didn't want to post it and we felt it was valuable to have people come to a webinar workshop because there's a lot of Q&A where a lot of valuable, questions and answers get shared. So we didn't want to thwart, the efforts of people coming to an actual event. We just now have finished a recording in English of a webinar. And it's getting translated. So those will be posted in the 4 languages. We also have a translation and interpretation contract with Imani Lee. And they are translating, I guess you would say interpreting, because it's the actual spoken word of the webinar. So that will be posted in the 4 different languages soon.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. I had another question, but I can wait for my turn after that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you for the question. But we'll try to get to as many different attendees before going back. So thank you for that. Our next question is from Isaac Bravo. Isaac, you're now unmuted on our end. If you'd like to go and state your name, affiliation, and ask your question.
Isaac Bravo with the City of Marietta. Quick question on outreach to HOAs. Would you have any insight as to how you dealt with HOAs and their board?
I mean, we do a site visit. I had a meeting with 2 of our staff that do a lot of the residential visits today. And we were saying, one of the big problems they usually have is where are we going to put these bins, so both of our staff that go out and do these residential visits have really found that once you get out to the site, you usually you find the places where they can put them that they hadn't thought about, So a lot of it has just been getting out to the site, doing the site visit, working on logistics with them, providing them that technical assistance so that they can determine where they can place their bins, how their tenants can use those bins effectively. So I think that was the key. I think you could send them out information, but I think getting out there and actually walking the site with them is probably the most successful for us anyway. That's made the difference. And I'm not sure if that completely answered your question. Did you have any other parts of that question that you wanted me to address? Okay.
Okay, up next, we have Mary Ilze. Apologize if I mispronounced that. Mary, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. And Isaac confirmed that that was an adequate response. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, thank you. It's Mary Bilsey with the City of Carmel. I just had a question. I understood that the City of San Diego doesn't charge their residents for trash service, and I was wondering if you have started implementing a fee for trash service and if you've also incorporated the organics fees into that cost.
We do not currently charge for any trash recycling or organic waste recycling. Measure B passed, I can't remember the exact date, but not too long ago, that will allow us to develop a fee structure, and that's going to take it. Yeah, I see a note coming in the People's Ordinance. So yeah, Measure B allows us to basically get rid of the People's Ordinance, and the People's Ordinance is a law that's been in place since the late 1800s. I want to say it's like 100 years, and it said that we had to provide free service, but that does put us you know, in a bit of a bind on being able to provide the quality service that we can, you know, because we need a budget for that. So being able to charge will allow for better service, and you know, so we're working to develop the a cost analysis, basically, first off, to determine the structure of how much it would cost to service our city residents. So there will most likely be a fee implemented in the future, but at the moment we do not have a fee.
Oh, thank you. And what is the population that you currently serve?
We're serving approximately 285,000 residents. Cities.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for your presentation.
Thank you.
Quick note, we have a ton of great information coming in from Julie Sands. So Julie, I went ahead and made you a co-host, so you can go ahead and mute yourself if you'd like to contribute some of that background information whenever.
Thanks, Julie.
Oh, yeah, I mean, Jeannie's got it covered. I just was trying to help out with some of the questions I was seeing, like the last one about the People's Ordinance. And that will be changing, but we don't really have a timeline yet when we'll be able to start charging. It'll be a little while.
All right, our next question is from an anonymous participant. So I suppose I'll just go ahead and read it. Did you share information at webinars and events about future route audits and lid tipping?
It wasn't a majorly, you know, it wasn't something we majorly focused on, but we did briefly. I think there was one slide where we let them know that, you know, we were required to enforce on SB 1383.
Yeah, and Jeannie, I would say, like, I'd say the business community more so than the residential. That does often, that's a pretty common question. You know, are you guys, is the city going to be enforcing? And really, I mean, we've only just, we're still not officially done with our rollout. But the focus is definitely not on enforcement right now. We're just trying to get people to first have access to organic waste recycling. And also, you know, creating, I'm sure everyone on this webinar pretty much knows that creating this kind of lasting behavior change
Mhm.
It's really challenging. And this is, for some of us, it might not be that big of a deal, but I think for others, this is just, they've never done it. It's very different for them. So getting them to get used to this, to do it every day, we don't expect that to happen overnight. So we focused a lot on like starting out simple, get that banana peel, that watermelon rind, kind of the easier, more basic stuff. And then they can gradually work their way up to hopefully everything, even meat and bones. And then the enforcement side, I mean, when we do get those questions, often, like I said, from businesses, I think HOAs tend to ask it too, when are you guys going to be enforcing? We do mention 2024 because that's what the regs say. So, but at this point, we're really, really education and outreach focused.
Mhm. Thanks, Julie. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with everything Julie said. Yeah, and I mean, and I will say it does help us if there are a lot of questions about enforcement. I mean, it helps us to be able to say, well, this is part of what the state law is requiring us to do. So it allow, it's easily explainable, like it's part of the state law. You know, so I usually with businesses totally address that, we're here as this local jurisdiction to make sure our local businesses can meet these state requirements. Like we're the good person, like the good one coming in to help you, meet the requirements, to try to soften, the idea of the enforcement. But yeah, people and businesses know about it.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for one more quick question, from Jasmine Haddon. Jasmine, you are unmuted on our end. If you can go ahead and unmute yourself, state your name, affiliation, and ask your question.
Hi, Jasmine Haddon from City of Monrovia. I was actually going to ask about notice violations and what your plan was for enforcement. So I jumped ahead of the game for that question. But I guess this could be for CalRecycle. With the expectation to begin enforcement in 2024, but a lot of us are really focusing on education primarily. How do you guys plan on enforcing jurisdictions to enforce enforcement if we really want to focus on education?
Hey, thank you for that question. Like all answers, I always start with, it depends. It depends on, what are, if you are seeing violations, the regs do require starting in 2024 to, issue those notices of violation. With that said, though, contamination monitoring, right, that's a may in the regulations. It doesn't require a jurisdiction to enforce or have penalties for contamination. I think, to Julie and Jeannie's point, I think really getting collection out there to folks, getting them educated, working on changing behavior is the most important part to start, and then creating that feedback loop. And there may come a point in time where a jurisdiction, after they've been implementing for a while, if they're seeing high levels of contamination still, sometimes that is a good time to use, that enforcement stick. I think it's also been valuable in some of the messaging to, I think it was Jeannie's point, maybe it was Julie's point, not overemphasizing enforcement, but to be able to say that, we're looking for everyone to participate in the right way, right? Put things in the right containers. And that, if we're not doing it right, we do have enforcement in our toolkit. And that can be a part of the messaging. And I have found it to be very helpful in many communities. To get at your question, we are expecting jurisdictions to begin enforcement if there are violations. Primarily, this is going to be for, entities that have refused collection service, or if there are violations related to edible food recovery. So does that help answer your question a little bit?
I think after, there, she's unmuted. So I wasn't sure if she could unmute.
Oh, thank you. It does. Thank you. I guess enforcement also looks different for everyone. So as long as we're issuing those notice of violations, the consequential amount varies, or whether or not there is an amount attached to that.
Yeah, the regulations are quite prescriptive as far as how the enforcement process needs to work. I did want to share with you though, and Ray, maybe this is a great time to plug our plans. We are planning to do a 1383 chat that's focused on jurisdictions that have either started implementing their enforcement program or are planning, they're well on their way to share what they're doing. Ray, do you want to plug that real quick?
Sure. So yes, as Kara mentioned, we are planning our next upcoming webinars. We are slating 2 for the month of October, one focused on enforcement and the other focused on contamination minimization and monitoring. We haven't pinned down the exact dates for that, so please remember to subscribe to the listserv and we'll keep you up to date once we have those set up and potentially once we reach out to you as a panelist. So if you do have any ideas or would like to highlight yourself, please go ahead and send an email to the SLCP inbox. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Of course. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and thank City of San Diego for your participation. We'll go ahead and move into our next section. Next slide. Thank you. And with that, I will go ahead and pass it to Laura, CalRecycle staff member, to go ahead and introduce our next speaker. Thank you, Laura.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Chang, and I'm the CalRecycle land representative for Santa Cruz in Monterey County. And it is with great pleasure to introduce our next panelist, Jana Falk. Jana is the recycling coordinator for Salinas Valley Recycles, a prominent leader in their mission to make a difference for future generations through their implementation of SB 1383 programs. So please welcome Jana.
Right, thank you. Yes, hi, I'm Jana Falk from Salinas Valley Recycles. Thank you so much for having me today. We here at SVR, Salinas Valley Recycles, have a huge mission to eliminate the need for landfills. Next slide. So we are JPA, go the next, making up the eastern portion of Monterey County. Go to the, there we go. And all of the cities within this green border is within our jurisdiction. We have one active landfill at Johnson Canyon, as well as a transfer station and recycling center. So unlike the city of San Diego you just heard from with a small geographic area, we have less residents and a much larger geographic area. Going on to the next slide. So to achieve this mission, we must be in the industry of behavior change. Some of that has been mentioned today already. Studies have shown that knowing better doesn't actually change someone's behavior and resulting in doing better. So we've turned to community-based social marketing to help our community shift to sustainable long-term change, one behavior at a time. Next. So community-based social marketing isn't just education. It's taking a look at personal psychology, the culture, the peers of the community, looking at the barrier and benefits of doing or not doing a behavior. And by helping reduce those barriers and increase the benefits, the behavior is easier to accomplish and more in line with what the community values. So getting that change through community work. Next. So we looked at adding food scraps to our current residential yard waste carts as an opportunity to start a brand new program off on the right foot. Our consultant, Action Research at the time, helped us with a hot stamp design of our new kitchen pail. We initially had a design with many more icons. However, after a simple next door survey, it was determined that 2 icons per food group and words indicating what shouldn't go in was the best way to visually show what would be included and was the clearest among all of the tested items. And then we also included a QR code to link directly to our site. And we also wanted to test the best outreach method to residents. So initially we thought we would test the messaging But after Action Research conducted a mail survey of similar socioeconomic communities to where we would be doing our pilot testing, a program was developed to test how much receiving a kitchen pail would assist residents in participating. So we had several cities interested in providing everyone a kitchen pail, and some cities that had no interest in spending those funds or didn't have the funds to do it. So it was important to us to have some data to determine if kitchen pails actually do in fact change behavior. Several test groups were run, including receiving just the information, receiving a kitchen pail and information, or receiving the information and a coupon to pick up a kitchen pail. And then after those were out for a few weeks, our consultant went out and did lip flips to test the data. Next slide. So the mail-back study found that 73% of the people we surveyed agreed with the statement that people in my neighborhood would think that creating compost from our household food scraps is the right thing to do. However, you can see from the data here that 73% of the participants did not in fact engage in the behavior of putting their food scraps in the green cart. So knowing better does not equal behavior change. The highest participation rate was in the pail delivery group. However, that's only 21%, which means that 79% of our pails were not used for the intended purpose and were put back into the recycling or trash or used for some other thing like a mop bucket. Additionally, additional note is that I just lost my spot. Is that it's important to note that the group was offered to pick up a pail. 40 of them drove to City Hall, picked up a pail, but only 10 of those people that picked up a pail actually participated. So we were able to glean from this information that access to a kitchen pail may assist residents in participating, but the cost of the program does not increase participation to a rate that would warrant purchasing kitchen pails for the entire community, especially since we are also promoting reuse, reduction, and not wanting to give people durable goods that will be a waste of resources to our planet. Next slide. So with our community-based social marketing results, we got to work creating marketing materials that focused on the behavior we wanted residents to do, the putting food scraps in the green cart. We also wanted to focus on removing obstacles, such as not having a kitchen pail, by advertising ways to use existing containers, such as a yogurt tub, to move the food scraps from your kitchen to your green cart. So as you can see, our reuse flyer and one of our guide sheets at the bottom of the page. In the top corner, you see an ad we placed in several print and e-news outlets, and then our first billboard in the center and some social media posts that we've done, just all clearly identifying the singular behavior we want people to do, putting the food scrap in the cart. Next. We also tested messaging on digital platforms, and so our messaging showed that the customers in our area want clear and concise messaging. These Google test ads determined what the most clicked on ads were before we did any wide scale distribution. These simple messages were among the highest rated. Our community does not click on funny or cute or silly messages. They want clear, concise messaging, and that won every time. Next. We also had the opportunity to run some billboards in Salinas for a short time at the end of this last fiscal year. We focused on highlighting the benefit and the actions we wanted residents to take away. We learned a lot from these initial billboards, and we're going to pare down these messages even more so that as you're driving by, you really just get that action. We know that the benefit is helpful in knowing why people might do something, but we want them to take home the action of just putting the food scraps in the cart. Next slide. We also have our all services brochure that lists all the different services we provide and locations for things such as sharps and battery recycling, as well as when you open it up, it is a sorting guide. So if you, the next slide. So open unfolded, it's a clear visual and concise wording in both Spanish and English to help residents know what goes where, which is also an app we provide at whatgoeswhere.info. But then also they could put this up in their kitchen or behind a cupboard door to easily visually reference where the materials go. Next. So multifamily is still residential, and we all know that is a whole beast in itself. We created a full train the trainer program for property managers and owners for them to successfully start and run their own programs. Next slide. And we also made a series of videos in Spanish and English for tenants, including kid-specific videos, as we know the youth are typically the ones assigned the trash chores at home. So we're sharing this with all of the multifamily as we're doing door to door, and also the managers have these resources to share with their tenants. Next slide. And even though today isn't about schools, we know kids are often the champions for sustainable practices at home. So I wanted to mention our schools programs. If anybody needs resources to implement in their area, you can check out our website, click on At School for all of our resources, lots of videos, interactive game, lots of fun stuff there. Next slide. And then additionally, we have robust commercial education and outreach program. We have online training videos in both Spanish and English. We go out to sites and provide business starter kits, which include internal food, scrap bins, posters, information. Just want to be there whole step of the way. And next. And so with that, happy to share and provide additional resources. If you have any questions, please reach out. You can find us at salinasvalleyrecycles.org, or you can email me at janaf@sbswa.org.
Thank you so much. We do have a number of questions that I think will open it up to the entire panel. So for the sake of time, we'll go ahead and go on to the next speaker and have one longer Q&A session at the end. Addie? Please go ahead and introduce our next speaker. Thanks.
All righty. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adi Lene. I am an environmental scientist with the Local Assistance and Market Development Unit. I would like to introduce Gabriel Silva. He is the Environmental Programs Manager for Pasadena, and he has been kind enough to join us here today to talk a little bit about the city successes with the implementation of SB 1383. So thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Gabriel Silva. I'm an environmental programs manager for the City of Pasadena Public Works Resource Recovery and Recycling Division. Thank you for this opportunity to share some of the successes of our organics recycling program. Next slide, please. In the City of Pasadena, the city provides resource management for our residential customers. We service 27,000 single-family residents, 642 residential estates, 275 multifamily residents, 4 units or less, and all of our city facilities, 54 city facilities. Next slide, please. We also have a non-exclusive franchise system. We have 20 non-exclusive franchise haulers that compete for the commercial multifamily 5 units or more service. We have 7 haulers that are approved for organics recycling, and they service 2,939 commercial generators, which are multifamilies 5 units or more and businesses. Next slide, please. What the organic services that the city provides are curbside bag food waste added to our green waste bin. We're basically utilizing one container to capture both our yard waste and bag food waste. Our yard waste goes to a composting facility. It gets taken to the Aggerman facility in Oxnard, California, where it goes through Windrose composting. And our bag food waste is pulled out manually by personnel and placed into a large roll-off where it's taken over to the Puente Hills Material Recovery Facility. That bag food waste is fed to a DOTA machine that basically grinds up all the material, and in that process screens out the bags, and the remaining food is turned into like a bioslurry that is fed to a digester and turned into biogas for green energy. We tell our residents to please reuse the bags that they already generate. Bread bags, carrot bags, potato sacks, any sort of bag, and reuse it to contain their food waste. We also provide backyard composting. We sell them to our residents at cost, and we provide them for free to residents that attend our composting workshops. We host monthly composting workshops. And our third option is community compost hubs. I'll go into more detail in the next slide. Next slide, please. The city has built community compost hubs. We utilized our worker training program, our MASH program, to build them. The photo on the right shows our first community compost hub built in one of our city parks. They cost us about $10,000 to build one hub. That's the material and the labor. For our residents to participate in our community compost hubs, they have to be a member. Membership is free. All they have to do is participate in training. We have virtual training on our website, or we have on-site training, in-person on-site training. Our plan is to have 8 community compost hubs in our city, throughout our city. We have 6 in place now that are up and running. These community compost hubs, we used LA Compost, their model. They had 2 compost hubs in our city already going for years. One at a native plant garden, a passive garden park situation. And they also had a compost hub in a 25-unit condominium complex that was totally run by their residents. And the Arlington Gardens is totally run by volunteers. LA Compost also has a tool called Compost Coach Program that provided us a lot of information and guidance in doing our own community compost system. So our system is currently run by city staff. We visit each compost hub once a week. We provide the brown material to add to the green material that the residents add. And it takes us about an hour per site per week to maintain them. Our goal is to eventually turn it over to the volunteers. We're working on a web-based system, a volunteer system to manage that, but that's still in the works. Next slide, please. Like the other cities before us, we've done a great deal of outreach. Most of the outreach has been developed by city staff. We've done direct mailings with letters and flyers, utility bill inserts. The city has a monthly newsletter called Pasadena in Focus that goes out to every resident. We've had articles there. We've worked with our PIO to do social media blast. We've developed 2 public service announcements, one developed by staff, another one developed by one of our council members that has helped champion our organics program. We have our information on our city website. We've done stickers for the lids of our containers. We've worked with our local Chamber of Commerce and business associations to do webinars. And then we do our monthly compost workshops. Next slide, please. We hired a consulting firm, MIG, to help us develop to further develop our outreach. They've done an audit of all of our materials and analyzed it and provided a lot of valuable feedback that we've already incorporated. They've researched other organics recycling educational programs. and helped develop some design concepts. On the bottom of this slide, you'll see some of the design concepts that they've developed for us, where they're in the process of developing an implementation plan. So we're going ahead with the Wrap Your Scraps organics recycling campaign. Next slide, please. Next slide. This chart shows how our curbside organics program has been going for this first 18 months. As you can see, in the first 2 months, we weren't collecting any material. We were ready to go January 1st, but our outreach wasn't sufficient in the beginning, and we really started ramping it up these first few months. Our consultant came on board in July, August timeframe, analyzed our information, and where you see that big jump in our data is where we actually had all their input incorporated into our messaging, and it focused more on call of action and the results from those actions. So you see a big jump in the data in November. We see that as related to the November time fair, the holidays where people are actually clearing out a lot of their refrigerator and making way for the holiday food. And then we see a big jump in March, April, where probably Easter time frame. And then we see it now starting to come down in June, and earlier in June you could see that dropping down also a year before. And that's probably what the time where folks are starting to go on vacation, kids are getting out of school. So we're at about 20 to 30 tons a month collected, and we like to say that we're recycling a ton a day of organics, of food waste through our program. Next slide. This is my final slide. This shows our franchise hauler data. The blue represents the food waste only. Green, the orange is the green waste only. Gray is our mixed organics. And the orange there is the combined total of the organics collection. So you can see how in the first few months the tonnage collected by our franchise haulers almost doubled, and it remains high, and there's an upward trend. So as far as our commercial collection, that's where we see our biggest challenge right now, getting the commercial participation to go up, and it'll be our focus in the future. And that's my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you, Jana. We're going to go ahead and open it up to our final Q&A session, which we have plenty of time for. So please go ahead and add your questions to our Q&A pane. Let's focus on SB 1383 implementation. CalRecycle may have the opportunity to answer some of those other questions. But for now, we'll go ahead and gear these questions to our panelists. If you cannot unmute yourself, please go ahead and send them to our slcp.organics@calrecycle.ca.gov inbox. Be sure to state your name and affiliation before asking your question. This will be transcribed and put on our YouTube channel for reference in the future. And so for sake of transparency and being able to document, go ahead and ask that you please repeat those things. Katie?
All right, first up, we have a question from an anonymous participant. So unfortunately, I will not be able to ask them to unmute. So I'll just go ahead and read it. Has there been an uptick in odor or vector issues or complaints in neighborhoods or at the greenery?
Is that towards the community compost hubs?
I think that question came in during Salinas Valley's presentation. I could be
I was
wrong.
there before I started talking.
Oh, okay.
But I'm
I
happy.
guess Okay, I guess that question might have been for Jeannie, but if you have a good answer, please share it with us. We'd love to hear it.
Yeah, we haven't seen any additional vector issues come in. I think the majority of the vector concerns are before anybody starts composting and putting food scraps in their cart. Once they've started doing it, they haven't noticed a big concern. At least it hasn't gotten to me if it has.
For Pasadena, we're asking folks to bag their food waste, and that's helping with the ick factor. If residents are concerned with odors, we tell them to freeze their food waste. Keep it accumulated in their freezer in a bag and bring it out on the day of collection.
Yeah, and I'll say, yeah, we'd always suggest the freezing as well. And I mean, I wouldn't say it, I mean, an uptick in definitely, but because we didn't have any food scraps collection previously, so there's definitely been an uptick in concerns over the ick factor or odors. But yeah, I think the freezing is probably the best way to go.
Yeah, I just wanted to share one more. I was at CRA last week, and a tip that was shared was spraying the rim of your container with Dr. Braun. This is not a sales pitch for Dr. Bronner's, but Dr. Bronner's Castile soap, putting some of that in a water bottle, spraying that. I guess it works absolute wonders. And another idea was, after your container is empty, just leaving the lid open, maybe for a day or a few hours to let the sun hit it. I personally had, an amazing breakout of lovely critters. And, luckily I was not too freaked out by it, but I can see how someone could be. So I love that Castile soap idea and letting the sun hit it.
Thanks, Kara. It looks like we lost Sam Dickinson, but we can open this question up to the entire panel regarding salons, barbers, and hair waste under 1383. Under the regulations definition of organic waste, hair would theoretically apply. Have any of the panelists started this yet or have any advice in approach?
We haven't really done much outreach to nail or hair salons yet, but I do know that our composter has no problem with some hair as long as it's coming in clean and it's not processed and covered in wet dye. Then there shouldn't be a problem with that going through the compost system.
Sorry, I wasn't able to unmute. We haven't really addressed hair. I mean, I know I've had our staff biologists, concerned about all the product that's used in hair, and the fact that even not all of it's even organic because there's synthetic weaves that people use. So we haven't really promoted for people to put hair in their organic waste bin.
All right, now I think let's go ahead and move on to Lorena Childress, who has a couple of questions. Lorena, you should be able to unmute now, and please go ahead and ask the panelists your first question. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Okay, thank you. We have been getting some questions recently. We're working on our tier 2 outreach, and a large number of our tier 2 facilities happen to be schools. We were reading some of the FAQs on CalRecycle's website related to the schools, which the FAQs ended up prompting more questions than answering the questions we were getting from the schools. Can you clarify just from a functionality point of view, what is the jurisdictional responsibilities where school districts or public schools are concerned from a data collection and reporting point of view? We're doing lots of educational outreach. Everybody's really appreciative of that. But then they're like, so what's our next step? And I'm like, let me get back to you. So do the schools, the public school districts have a responsibility to report data annually to us as the local jurisdiction in the same fashion as some of the other commercial food generating entities? And or we also happen to have a UC in our county. Does the UC itself have an obligation to report data to us?
Sure, I'll go ahead and we can do a follow-up if you want to dive deeper into this. So feel free to reach out to your LAM liaison and we can get a call scheduled so we can dive into all your scenarios. But in general, I assume we're talking about if they are a commercial edible food generator. We're talking about edible food recovery, is that correct?
Yes, I'm sorry. I was having trouble with the unmute button there for a second. It wasn't letting me unmute.
No worries.
Yes,
Okay, cool.
the data collection and the reporting piece for the annual report that we're going to be collecting with all of our other edible food generators.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So the way the regs are constructed, the jurisdictions are responsible for educating all commercial edible food generators. So regardless of whether they're a local education agency, a school district, or a university that falls under the commercial edible food criteria. So you're responsible for doing that education outreach. You're also responsible for the inspections. And that includes, that requirement on those entities to provide their information to you on the amount of edible food. But remember, commercial edible food generators are not, unless you have something specific in your ordinance, like in Santa Clara County, for example, they have a reporting requirement. It's the food recovery organizations and services that are located in your jurisdiction that are doing the reporting to you of the pounds. So in general, unless you have something more restrictive, you're talking about doing education outreach to all commercial edible food generators within your jurisdiction. You are inspecting on a frequency that you set on all commercial edible food generators. If you find that a commercial edible food generator that is a local education agency or a non-local entity, which would be the case if it was a university, then you would communicate if there is an enforcement, you're finding that they are not, I don't know, maybe they don't have an edible food recovery agreement, for example, then you would report that to CalRecycle. CalRecycle is responsible for conducting any enforcement on local enforcement agencies and non-local entities. So I hope that's helpful. If this leads to follow-up questions, let's feel free to set up a follow-up call because happy to chat through that more. But was that helpful?
Yes, that does help some. It does raise more questions. I will follow up with you more afterwards.
Oh, perfect. Then let's set up a meeting. We can chat through it.
I know.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. And Jana, you shared something in the chat. Did you want to go ahead and plug those reels?
Sure. Yeah, we just last week started our first round of reels. So apparently that's a whole new thing, and we're educating all over the world. People in Chile and Mexico are watching our reels about food scrap recycling. So just wanted to let you all know we have some reels up, and that's our new thing to try to burst out of our bubble, because we feel like a lot of times we are educating the people that are interested and are actually tuning in to the information. And so we're trying to get all of those people that are not easy adopters or people looking for the information.
We did also have a question that came in through our chat. Sarah Sivertson, I'm not sure if this is geared towards CalRecycle or if you wanted to know the individual panelists' jurisdictions plans for fines, but if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, state your name, affiliation, and ask your question, you're unmuted on our end.
Yeah, so I think it's just a general question for CalRecycle and more geared towards the commercial side of things.
So maybe we'll hold off on that one then, unless. And the question was specifically, when do fines begin for those not in compliance?
Sarah, are you asking the panel or are you asking CalRecycle?
CalRecycle.
Sorry about that. If I understand the question, jurisdictions must start conducting enforcement starting in 2024. Is that the question?
Yes, I think that does for now. So I am from Kern County Public Health, and we have a food recovery program here. So I'm working more with the commercial folks, and I was just wondering when, because I've heard that there's going to be fines associated for those commercial entities, and I was wondering when that is going to begin.
Yeah, so yeah, thanks, Sarah, for that. And thanks for all you're doing to implement the program in Kern County. Yeah, as you are inspecting those commercial edible food generators, still trying to provide a lot of education outreach. If you determine that the commercial edible food generator is violating their requirements, then there is the enforcement process, which Kern County has within its ordinance. Starts out with a notice of violation and can progress. Typically, we're finding with jurisdictions that have started enforcement that usually that warning, that notice of violation gets their notice and it ends up getting corrected. So happy to set up a follow-up conversation if there's any additional questions that the county team has. So feel free to let your local assistance liaison know and we can set up a conversation.
Thank you so much for that.
All right, we have another question about fines that is from Lorena Childress. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute, Lorena, and please go ahead and ask your second question.
Hi, thanks again. We did have a couple of questions. We're working on developing our edible food recovery organizations. And we had an outreach from one of them asking from their point of view for their materials and how they're educating people as well on their end, that was it okay for them to tell people that they could eventually get fined if they don't comply? And also, was there a prescriptive use for any fines or fees collected under SB 1383? And if so, was there a way for part of that funding to be funneled to food recovery organizations to increase their capacity? i.e., can they get a piece of the pie?
I probably missed some of that and I apologize. I definitely got the last part, and really it's up to the jurisdiction and how you structure, what you do with your penalties. So I think that's really going to vary. There's nothing in the regulations that prescribes how that any penalties that are issued, how that money must be used. The regulations do lay out the process for the notices, the enforcement process for jurisdictions, but each jurisdiction in its enforcement ordinance has the specifics on how, or should have the specifics on how that enforcement process should be implemented, including the level of fines and how the penalties will work. So let me know if that helped answer the questions.
Yes, it definitely did. Thank you very much.
All right, next we have a question from Liliana Cortez. Liliana, you should be able to unmute now. Please go ahead and state your name and affiliation and ask your question.
Hi, my name is Lily. I'm with the city of Torrance. Public Works, and I just had a question for Gabriel about the community composting hubs. You mentioned that they're run by city staff, and I was just curious which departments. And if it's not staffed by Public Works, how did you, I guess, go about getting other departments on board? And then my follow-up question was for the $10,000 per hub figure, is that just to start the hub, or are there other ongoing costs? And I guess, is it all, I guess, worth it in the sense of how much diversion or how successful that program is? It's a lot of questions in one, but
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. The cost is includes materials and labor. The benefits of the of each compost hub, it's more than just a diversion. It's all of the education and outreach you get out of it, and community involvement. That's how we justify it. The maintenance or operation of the community compost hub is done by my staff. It's just there's 3 of us here, and we just take turns once a week to go out there. It's about a half day worth of work for us. I think it was when we proposed our curbside program, there was a lot of concern that the material was going to go away, and it would be not a local option. And this provides that local option. And it's an investment in the community. So that's how we justify it.
got it. Thank you.
I think this is a good opportunity to go back to Isaac Bravo's question and get the other panelists' take on education and outreach to HOAs, and especially with dealing with those board members and getting everybody in line with implementing programs at that level.
I can answer first. Lane as Valley Recycles. We haven't done all too much with HOAs. It's not a huge portion of our existing area. I know that on the other side of Monterey County, there's a HOA area that has been quite a concern. But right now we're really focused on property managers and property owners for multifamily or the larger service. The way our franchise agreements work, any single family dwelling or residence has a 3-cart system already. So getting additional service wasn't a concern for these HOAs. It's more the multifamily segment that may not have a cart service paired with a dumpster or other materials for their existing collection.
Gabriel, did you have any input from Pasadena?
I didn't catch that. What was that again?
So Isaac Bravo asked about education and outreach to HOAs. How has the jurisdiction been dealing with getting board members and other decision makers in line with starting programs and increasing organics?
Right. We have met with one HOA. If we're talking about the community compost hubs at the HOA at the condominium complex, we've met it was a group of residents that were interested in starting up this sort of program. And we just help support it. But yeah, actually, I don't have anything else to add. We've done just general outreach, and that included our HOAs.
We have 10 community hubs.
And for San Diego, I think it's more on an as needed basis if we need to provide that technical assistance. So the haulers have been required to get the bins out. And so it's not so much a matter if the HOAs are going to do it, it's just if they need advice on how to do it effectively, then we can provide that technical assistance.
All right, thanks, everyone. So up next, we are going to circle back around to a question from Paul Freund with Tehama County Solid Waste about enforcement web pages. Paul, you should be able to unmute now, and please go ahead and ask.
Yeah, thank you. Paul Freund, Tehama County Solid Waste Management Agency. I was just curious when you anticipate having those two sections of the webpage live. Have been, enforcement's coming up soon, so just curious. Other than that, I had another question about definitions. Right. Figured to ask that. Just to clarify for the tier 2 under can you hear me?
Yes, and I apologize.
Okay, good. I was like, am I still muted? Is it was like crickets out there, but not actually like we had in our office.
No, I'm so sorry. Could you restate your first question? I'm so sorry.
When will you have the enforcement sections of the SB 1383 implementation webpage live? They've been saying coming soon since they've been there, and we're about 4 months away.
Totally.
So
yeah. Well, so some things have been updated on the webpage. So, for example, recently we put up all of the 120 something jurisdictions in our corrective action plans, and we put up their corrective action plans. So, Paul, I can follow up with Ashley on those specific other pages. If there's anything in particular that you feel is needed.
I was just curious because one's for jurisdiction oversight and enforcement, and one's for CalRecycle oversight and enforcement. It'd just be helpful to have some before. I'm hoping before January 1, 2024, there'll be some additional guidance there. Like you've had for other things like definitions, the tier 2s, the infographics, the language for violations, complaint log, different. I'm not sure what's going to be on that website, so that's what I'm just curious.
Totally.
It'd be nice to have that before we actually have to enforce.
Yeah, I gotcha. I'll follow up because I'm not exactly sure, so I'm happy to follow up on that. If you didn't hear Paul earlier, though, we do plan in October. Date hasn't been set yet, but we'll get out notice that we are going to have a 1383 webinar chat on enforcement. We're going to be focusing on sharing what jurisdictions enforcement programs, and we'll have an overview in that workshop of the enforcement, kind of the overall general overview of what jurisdictions are supposed to do for enforcement. So I think that's going to be a great webinar, but I will follow up on the webpage. Go ahead and go into your second question.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. I'm assuming I didn't see it actually defined in the regulations, but is the definition for local agency under the definition of a tier 2 large event, which says it seems like the qualifier is either you charge admission or the local agency is in charge of it. And is the definition of local agency consistent with California Government Code section 54951, which defines local agency? Because I did a quick Google search for local agency California. That's what came up. And again, you know, I see other references to like this is the same definition as this section, but I just want to make sure that we're including the appropriate large events and you know, not including ones we don't need to.
Yeah, gotcha. We may need to do a follow-up on that. Your local agency is not defined in the regulations. For the commercial edible food generators, where it refers to the large events, probably get this wrong, sorry. I always transpose them, venues and events. But in that definition where it talks about it's run or sponsored by a local agency, you know, we are referencing that statute. So I'll have to follow up. It's been a long time since I've looked at that particular statute and if local agency is defined elsewhere. So we'll follow up with you, Paul.
Okay, because I just want to make sure it's not like local agency is somehow construed as a chamber of commerce or a nonprofit that's running an event.
Gotcha. Yeah. It also, it's an or statement in that definition, right? So, but we'll follow up with you.
That's the qualifier though, correct? That is the qualifier. It's either admission or local agency.
Yes.
Okay, good. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Would define the large plus 2,000 people or more and stuff.
So that's why I hesitated, because you know, you could have a nonprofit that's running an event that meets the 2,000 people or more, right?
But they're not a local agency, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
they wouldn't have to donate. They wouldn't have to arrange for donations from the food vendors if it was a nonprofit or say a chamber of commerce. Those would not be required as large events. So they wouldn't even be qualified as a large event.
No, they would. So a large event, it could be a privately owned event, right? Could be a nonprofit that's running it. And then you could also have something that is run by a local agency. So
but if they don't charge an admission.
Yes, if they don't charge an admission, then it wouldn't fall in the definition.
That's what I was getting at. Yeah. So
okay, gotcha.
If it's not a local agency and they don't charge an admission,
right,
but they see 2,000 people or more per day, then it's still not a large event.
Correct.
That's what I was getting at.
Yes. Okay. Thanks for teasing that out, Paul.
Yeah. And then the last thing, you mentioned the ordinance or the LEAs, local education agencies. If it's defined in an ordinance, even though we don't have authority, the jurisdiction never had authority over the LEA, but it's defining, you know, any CEFG has to report, you know, to our agency by this date.
Yes, you have authority to do that, to require that.
Even though the LEA is not under the authority of the jurisdiction.
Correct. Yeah, and that's Santa Clara County, for example, requires all commercial edible food generators to report into their system. So you do have that ability. The key is it gets to that enforcement piece, right? So if you had a situation where that local education agency was not reporting to you and you have that as a requirement in your ordinance, then you would need to involve CalRecycle because you wouldn't be able
through the complaints portal that I've seen you guys submit. That's good.
Yep, you got it. Yeah. Thanks for all your questions, Paul. I appreciate it.
No, thanks for having the forum.
You bet.
All right, up next, I have a question from Jörg Blischka, if you could please unmute and state your name and affiliation for us, and then go ahead and ask your question, please.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Jörg Blischke. I'm with Black & Veatch, is an engineering, consulting, and construction company. My question is related to the co-collection of the food scraps in plastic bags that was featured, or has been implemented in Pasadena. And I think the concern I would see is that the plastic bags would break during collection, or not all, but some would break and cross mingle with a yard waste. And so I'm curious how the haulers make sure that the plastic bags don't break or stay intact. And then the other question is, how is it actually physically separated? And the receiving end, is it mechanically, is it manually, is it a mix of both, or?
Yes, that's for me. Our experience, based on our observations, the bags are able to hold up. And if they break, it's going with the yard waste and being composted anyway. So, and it's just considered part of the contamination, acceptable contamination. So it gets composted. When the yard waste and bag waste is tipped at the transfer facility, a front loader picks up a scoop of the pile and spreads it out. And then laborers go through and manually pick through, pull out the bag food waste. They have been picking out contaminants for years. So this is just another material they're pulling out of the green material. The green material has to be at a high quality. So they remove all the trash and the bag food waste. They've been doing this the whole time. It's just part of that process. When it gets taken to the Puente Hills MRF, where it's fed to a DOTA machine, that machine is able to break up the bags and screen out the plastic bags, and the food waste is left and forms this bile slurry that's fed to a digester. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's pretty labor intense though to separate this manually out. And as a side note, I'm aware that there's a company called Randy's in Minnesota that they collect the food scraps, co-collect with trash, and they use very sturdy, thick color. I think it's blue or green colored bags, and then that is my understanding is that it's brought to a material recovery facility and separated out with robotics to recover the food scraps, colored bags from the trash. But you're right. I mean, the cross-contamination, if you will, or the spilling of the food scraps into yard waste is certainly not bad, as long as the composting facility that takes the yard waste is permitted to process all the food scraps.
Right. Well, it's under the contamination levels, so it's fine. It meets that permitting requirement.
Thank you.
Thank you both. We're right at the end of the hour. So quick reminder to go ahead and any clarifications, any other questions, please go ahead and send them to our slcp.organics@calrecycle.ca.gov inbox. Next slide, Darren. Thank you. So a huge thank you to all of our panelists and all of our attendees here who participated today. These chats can't happen without you. We love seeing our stakeholders engage and have this opportunity to discuss a little more candidly with everybody. Few quick notes. Mentioned briefly earlier, we'll be having 2 chats in October. The dates are to be determined. One will focus on enforcement. The other will focus on contamination monitoring and minimization. If you have any questions, recommendations, suggestions, again, send them to that SLCP inbox. And unless we have any final words from our newest Deputy Director, Kara Morgan. I think we're all right. Then I think we're all done for the day. Thank you all so much. Have a good afternoon.